television, radio, all over the world, and has served as host of the award-winning national TV show Shalom in the Home on TLC, and The Shmuley Show, which was on 77 WABC. Please welcome Rabbi Shmuley Botev.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. What are you all doing out on Thanksgiving Eve in a bookstore? Why aren't you home preparing turkeys and all the fine accoutrements of one of America's special holidays? I am indeed flattered that you are, whatever the answer to that question may be. As a flawed man, and as an imperfect individual, I have always been intrigued as to what motivates me. Why do I do what I do? It would be easy to simply blame my environment. As many of my books have mentioned, I am a child of divorce. I was raised without the stability that I believe all children need in order to develop very healthy, sturdy, and stable characters. 1 out of 2 American kids is raised the way I was. Does that account for why I do not always become the man I wish to be? America seems to ascribe so many of its problems to environment. Why aren't we the country we wish to be? Why is our economy so bad? There is a global economic meltdown. We are just part of a larger organ, which would explain why we are experiencing problems. It's not us, it's everyone. Is that why we do what we do? Because we are nothing but pawns in the hands of much larger forces that sculpt us and shape us. Is that why I do what I do? Is that why all of you do what you do? A mother that didn't love you enough, a father that may have criticized you too much, a teacher that may have bullied you, a boyfriend who may have abandoned you. Is that why you can't be in a relationship? It's someone else's fault. It's possible. Possible, but very disempowering. If you are nothing but a creature of your environment, that's another way of saying you are nothing at all. And you have about as much control of your life as a sand dune that is simply sculpted by external winds. But I've never believed that. I have always believed that the person I am is almost entirely due to the choices I have made. There were certain things that I was looking for in life, and I therefore made those choices. If I chose to write a book, was it because I had something to offer and something to say? I would like to believe that is the case. Or was it because I had to see my name on the cover of a book? Was it because I enjoyed the attention that is accorded to authors who can speak on Thanksgiving Eve and still draw people to hear them? What was my motivation? If you watch the Republican presidential debate last night, the 460th debate this week. It really felt that way, I have to say. Why do they want to be president? Oh, if you ask them that, they will give you the standard response. They love the country. They want to save the country. If you ask President Barack Obama, he would probably answer the same. Is that the case? Or is there something deeper at work? Is there a need to prove oneself? I wrote this book because I am amazed at how little self-awareness we have in this country. We don't know why we do what we do. And how can we possibly gain control over our lives and become the people that we wish to be if we don't know what motivates us? If we continue to have such a superficial and shallow understanding of our motivations, of our inspiration. I'll give you another example. A friend of mine recently visited from overseas. He's from Australia, and he said to me, you know, I've been here for 2 weeks, and no one in America seems to smile anymore. He said, you all seem depressed. I said, yeah. Why do you think you watch so much television? I mean, thank God in America we have things that can distract us from the poor economy. Ashton and Demi are getting divorced. We can talk about that. There was the Michael Jackson trial, which was quite tragic. There's endless distractions. But we are a bit depressed because it's a very poor economy. Yesterday, for the first time, Wall Street fell into the red for the year 2011. Man, that's awful. 10% unemployment rate. And we struggle to feel inspired. Now, here's what's interesting. Again, in understanding what motivates us, we continue to look for some external form of inspiration. Barack Obama, lift us up. Take us to the mountaintop, as you did in 2008. What happened to your powerful oratory that used to have us on the edge of our chairs? Now, Obama's oratory has become so impotent that when he gave his last speech to a joint session of Congress in September to offer his jobs plan, he did so outside of prime time at 7 p.m. because that night was the NFL season opener, and he was afraid that no one would watch him and they would watch a ball being thrown instead. Conversely, in the Republican field, every week, there's another Republican Messiah. It's Rick Perry. Oh no, it's not Rick Perry anymore. It's Michelle Bachmann. Oh, not her anymore. It's now Newt Gingrich. Oh no, now it's Herman Cain. Why do we devour our leaders so quickly? 2 years ago, Barack Obama could walk on water. Now he's just treading that same water, even among his base. And the Republicans can't agree on who their nominee ought to be. And whoever it is, they're not going to like him anyway. Because we continue to be so dependent on someone outside of us to inspire us. When perhaps, it's supposed to come from within. Maybe we're looking in all the wrong places. This is where voices become so important. My first book in this series, I thank God published 26 books, which may sound like a lot, but some have sold 26 copies. So don't be too impressed. I have various series: the Kosher series, Kosher Sex, Kosher Adultery, the Kosher Sutra. The next one in that series is going to be Kosher Jesus, by the way, in February 1st, God willing. This is the second in the series. I just said voices are very important. I wrote a book called 10 Conversations You Need to Have with Your Kids. It was launched on the Oprah Winfrey Show 3 years ago. And it offered a new parenting model. Parenting is usually about reward and punishment, which is important. Kids have to know there are consequences to their actions. But rather than the child hearing the voice of their parent, what if really effective parenting was having the child hear his or her own voice? What if the child could learn to internalize all of the values that you hold sacred? And it was a book was very favorably reviewed. It continues to sell very well, thank God. I'm very proud of it. And this is the second in that series. Okay, if kids are supposed to hear a voice, what about we adults? There are three kinds of voices. You know, they say that if you talk to yourself, you're crazy. I actually believe if you don't talk to yourself, you're crazy. If you don't talk to yourself, if you have ceased to hear the three most important inner voices, it's because it's been drowned out by all the noise of the modern world. You're hearing voices that are not your own. I'll give you an example. Steve Jobs was very reclusive. The only time you really saw him in public was at the occasional speech and at Apple product launches. But he gave one major commencement address for Stanford, I believe it was 2005. It's now being replayed all over the internet. And he got up and he said to them, I'm only going to tell you 3 stories. Nice and simple 3 stories. And as he finished his speech, he said, I have cancer. And when you have cancer, and you have to face your mortality, you start thinking differently. Life is very short. He said, we're all going to die. And the question is, what will we do with our lives while we're still here? And then he said to each and every student there, because life is so short, make sure you don't live someone else's life. Live your life. Let's translate what he said. What he said is, don't hear someone else's voice. Don't hear Donald Trump's voice that tells you that success means having your name all over buildings. That's his definition of success. Why have you made it yours? And now you're paying thousands of dollars to go to seminars to learn how to be a great real estate entrepreneur. What if that's not your gift? What if you feel bad about yourself that you can't afford what he can afford when really you were supposed to make a completely different contribution, but you're not hearing your voice, you're hearing Donald Trump's voice? What if you hear the voice of people who told you you couldn't? A teacher who made you feel that you were stupid. A boyfriend who made you feel you were ugly. A parent who criticized you to the point where you ceased to believe in yourself. Now you're not hearing your voice. There are 3 inner voices we're supposed to hear. And these 10 conversations are subdivided into those 3 voices. First and foremost, there's the voice of inspiration. When I was asked to host Shalom in the Home, they don't offer you a TV show. You have to audition. Now, for years, ever since I published Kosher Sex, television has toyed with me. Come for an audition for this show, that show. Every time I go, Yom Kippur, we're not sure if Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma is ready for a rabbi in prime time. By the way, parenthetically, it turned out they were wrong. The non-Jews and the Christians, they had no problem with the rabbi in prime time. The only people who have a problem with me are the Jews. The Jews are like, I've heard rabbis before, turn the channel. Everyone else, that's intriguing. Wow, a rabbi, what does he have to say? But the Jews, I've heard this before. So by the time they asked me to host Shalom in the Home, I had no interest, or to audition for it, I had no interest. I said, yeah. Production company calls me and says to me, look, why don't you just come in and counsel a family, we'll film it. I said, I'm not going to waste my time. You guys are going to tell me the same thing. Rabbis aren't supposed to be hosting TV shows. They said, well, there's a family that you can host, that you can counsel early in the morning. We checked with your office. You're taking a red eye back from Los Angeles. You get in 5, 6 o'clock. We'll have you counsel them at 7 a.m. What have you lost? I said, okay, I'm going to be tired, unkempt. I'm going to smell. If you're prepared to put up with that, fine. You're right. No big loss. They picked me up straight from the airport and they take me straight to this house in New Jersey. What was the story? The story was that there was a woman with a daughter, married, divorced, married a man with a son. Both the kids were teenagers. 16-year-old girl hates her stepfather. She's creating so many problems that the new couple are about to divorce. Can I rescue this family? So I'm watching them through a closed-circuit monitor at breakfast. The mother makes bacon and eggs. Nice kosher breakfast. puts it on her daughter's plate. She squeezes fresh oranges for her daughter. Her daughter eats, watching TV the entire time, finishes eating, gets up, leaves. I say to the director, stop, I have to go and speak to her. No, that's not part of the service. I have to go speak to her. I go straight into the house, and a 16-year-old girl, you are never allowed admittance into a teenager's bedroom. It is the holy of holies. Even a parent must make an appointment. I knock on the door, and she says, yes. I said, can I speak to you privately? She said, okay. I come in, sit on a chair, and I say to her, I'm tired. I didn't sleep all night. I have a question. You're 16. When you get older, who do you want to be? And she said, oh, that's easy. I want to be a fashion designer. And I said to her, that's not what I asked. I didn't ask you, what do you want to do? I asked you, who do you want to be? She said, I'm confused. I said, well, if I ask you, what do you want to do? There's 1,000 answers. You could sell books in Barnes & Noble. You could be an astronaut. You could be a vet. You could be a fashion designer. But if I ask you, who do you want to be? There's only 2 answers. She said, what are they? I said, you could be good, or you could be bad. She said, that's easy. I want to be good. I said, really? I said, yes. I said, are you sure? I'm certain. I said, do you promise? I swear! I want to be good. This is a silly question. Leave me alone. I said to her, you tell me you want to be good, and yet I just watched you turn your own mother into your maid, your cleaner, and yet you tell me you want to be good. And I got up from the chair and I left her room. And she chased after me with tears streaming down her cheeks, and she said to me, how do I become good? I said, the first thing you do is you put other people before you. Your mother finally found happiness with one man, and you would rob her even of that. Because all you're interested in is whether you're happy. You start becoming good by putting others, the needs of others before your own. That's the ABCs of goodness. You know what had happened with this girl? She had ceased hearing the voice of inspiration. Every one of us has a voice that reminds us that we want to be good. That's where we start feeling shame. And here let's distinguish between shame and guilt, because they're not the same. When you do something that violates your inner sense of ethics or morality, you feel one of 2 things, either ashamed or guilty. If you feel shamed, you usually correct it. I'm ashamed of what I did, I'm going to go and say I'm sorry. I'm ashamed of what I did, I'm going to rectify the situation. If you feel guilty, notice you'll do nothing about it. Because you know what guilt is? Guilt is the most debilitating of all emotions. Guilt is where you get to do the wrong thing and not correct it because at least you feel bad about it. I don't have to correct it. I'm still a good person because I feel bad about what I did. In other words, we all want to be good. It's not that we are good. That famous philosophical debate of people are born good or bad, neither. We're all born innocent. You're neither good or bad. Your actions will determine what you become. But you have a desire to be good. That's that inner voice of inspiration that whispers to you that you were born for better things. So if someone knocks on your door and says, it's the Salvation Army. We're collecting money to clothe the poor during the Christmas period. And you're busy and you're not interested in giving, so I'll come back tomorrow. You slam the door. And a second later, what do you feel? Guilty. Now, why do you feel guilty? Because you want both things that are contradictory. You want to keep your money and be good. There's a contradiction. If you didn't give money, you're not good. But if I feel bad about the fact that I didn't give the money, now I get to keep it and I'm still a good person. That's why guilt is a debilitating emotion. But if you feel shame, I'm ashamed of myself. You chase after that person. Because shame doesn't absolve you of still having to do the right thing. I don't know a lot about guilt because I'm Jewish and we Jews have never felt guilty. Only Catholics feel guilty. And atheists don't have to feel guilty ever. The first voice is the voice of inspiration. And we have to attune ourselves to that voice again. It's the voice of your inner hero that whispers to you constantly that you're not born just to defeat your enemies on the battlefield. That's not heroism. You're not born just to throw an orange ball through a hoop so that you can earn millions of dollars and have thousands of girlfriends. You were born for moral greatness. You were born to lead a selfless life that is an inspiration to others and that makes you a hero to your children. That's the voice that Abraham heard under the sunlit heavens of Mesopotamia. Notice that Abraham, the great Jewish hero of the Bible, he's not famous for being a warrior. This isn't Achilles or Agamemnon. He's not Caesar. He's not Attila the Hun. He's not Genghis Khan. He's not Napoleon. The man sits outside his tent like a caterer, just trying to feed the hungry people. But he had a voice that said to him that with money came responsibility. If he was a nobleman, he had to sit outside and invite in the hungry. That's true heroism. Where is that voice today? Think about the voice that women hear today. The average woman hears a voice that assails her and assaults her day and night. Every time she wakes up in the morning, she is one more day away from her youth. And she has a voice that tells her, you're not pretty enough, young enough, thin enough, your legs are not long enough, your chest is not large enough, your hair is not blonde enough, your eyes aren't blue enough. Not enough, not enough. And how do we respond to that voice? Through cosmetic procedures. Through spending more time when you go out on a date in front of a mirror applying mascara than maybe reading a newspaper or a book so that on that date you have an opinion. That you have something to say, that you're not all cover and no book. We're hearing dangerous voices today. If you cease to hear that inner voice of inspiration, you will hear the voice of inadequacy. And if you cease to hear the voice that tells you you're enough to make a difference, you will hear the voice that tells you you are never enough. And you must therefore erase your individuality in order to conform, in order to be like everyone else. And that's where unhappiness and depression sets in. Because you know that you've erased your uniqueness. You're just like everybody else. That's what teenagers hear. What is peer pressure? Peer pressure is the voice that tells you you must be like everyone else in order to be loved. You have to fit in. You must make sure people love you by being like them. Because on your own, you're not enough. On Shalom Alone, I was counseling this girl. She was 17 years old, and she had anorexia. She had just come out of the hospital where she was 3 months she was in the hospital. By the time she came out, thank God, I think she was over 100 pounds, but in the hospital she was at 87 pounds. And I said to her, why won't you eat? She said to me, I hear a voice. And I've given him a name. I call him Ed, for an eating disorder. And every time I put food to my mouth, he says to me, wait. If you are disciplined enough to say no, you will be thin and beautiful. And the boys in the class will like you more. They'll be more drawn to you. You will be more popular. I said, Ed, is he a friend or a foe? She said, I'm not sure. I think he's a friend. So I asked for a break, and I went outside, and I put a stocking over my head. And I came back to the next scene. And she said, who are you? What are you doing? I said, I'm Ed. And I looked pretty ugly, even worse than I normally do. And she was really spooked. She said, take it off. It's unnerving. I said, yes, it is, isn't it? I just want you to put a face to Ed. He's no friend. The voice that tells you you're never enough. And if you just do X, if you make more money, someone will love you. If you're younger, someone will love you. If you just put a needle in your forehead and get rid of some lines, someone will love you, even if it means you can never move your face again. That's not the voice of a friend. That's the voice of inspiration. So that's the first voice, is the voice of inspiration. The second is the voice of conscience. Let me ask you a simple question. America is the most religious country in the Western world, by far. I lived in Western Europe for 11 years. I lived in England for 11 years. God is dead in Western Europe. Even in once very religious countries like Ireland, religion has gone off a cliff. You will not find any European leader getting up and saying, God bless Italy! Never! God bless the United Kingdom! Never. It's only here where you can't get elected unless you speak about God. In Europe, it's the exact opposite. America's a very religious country. God is on our money. Given that that's the case, how is it that religion has such little influence over the culture? On the one hand, studies show 90% of Americans believe in God. In Britain, it's 42% of the population. 90% of Americans believe in God. 80 million Americans are born-again Christians. Tim Tebow prays before every football game. So, given that religion is so powerful, how is it that religion has made no inroads into the popular culture? When I was at Shalom in the Home, I was like the first religious figure that did a mainstream TV show in prime time, maybe since Bishop Fulton Sheen in the 1950s. And even that was very tough going for me to make the show a success, etc., etc. You have Joel Osteen, he gets 6 million people watching him a week, it's amazing, but he has to pay to be on TV. He's not given a network show. There's Christian radio, it never breaks into mainstream radio. Hollywood, everyone agrees, is a culture without values. To be a celebrity today is to be in rehab on your 15th marriage. If you, God forbid, are still alive, not having OD'd. It's to have Dr. Drew try to save your life in celebrity rehab. So how could such a religious country have such a secular culture? There are probably several explanations, but I think this is one of the most important. There's a very beautiful and very famous story in the Bible about Elijah. He lived during the reign of King Ahab and his wife Jezebel. They were wicked people. They slaughtered all of God's true prophets. The only thing left were hundreds of the prophets of Baal, an idol. And Elijah was furious at the Jewish people for forsaking God. So he goes up to the desert and he says, God, Kano Kanisi, I am so jealous for your honor and your glory because the Jewish people have forsaken your covenant. God said, go further into the desert. He goes into the desert, 40 days and 40 nights. And when he gets there, God says, why are you here? He said, I'm here because I'm angry at the Jewish people. I'm angry at how they have forsaken you, how they have forgotten you. They're so unappreciative. Look at how immoral they are. Look at this culture. It's so decadent. So God says, I will answer you. And then one of the most famous stories of the Bible relates, suddenly there was a terrible wind, Farik Harim in Hebrew, so strong that it uprooted mountains. But God was not in that terrible wind. And then there was a fire, an inferno, that consumed everything in its path. But God was not in the fire. And then there was an earthquake and storms and thunder and lightning. But God was in none of that either. And then famously and very beautifully it says in the Hebrew, Yachar harash kol mamadana. And after that terrible din, after all the noise, there was a still, small voice. Once upon a time, religion spoke with a still, small voice, trying to inspire people to be better, not through condemning them, not through telling them they were immoral, baby killers, gay men, or destroying marriage, abortion is the end of our civilization. Whatever, even if those are your beliefs, there was a time when religion spoke to the heart of men and women with a still, small voice. it penetrated their defenses by being sincere. The voice of God is always a still, small voice. When you parent your kids, or if you teach your students at school, I promise you, you will see. It is not the voice of condemnation that gets through to them. It is always the still, small voice. It is that voice of sincerity. As the Talmud famously expresses it, words that emanate from the heart, penetrate the heart. That is the voice of conscience. In addition to your voice of inspiration, there's another voice that speaks to you. It tells you about simple right and wrong. It tells you that there are things that you do that are in accordance with your deepest values and things that violate your values. And the reason we have ceased to hear that voice is that consciousness becomes a club by which we berate other people. Look at the toxic political climate that today dominates the United States. The whole purpose of having a political voice is to condemn your opposition. There's no one talking to us. There's no one reminding us that there's right and wrong, good and bad. There are just people berating us. And it's become boring. And it doesn't inspire. I'm a religious man, and I believe in the power of religion to heal, inspire, guide. But just think about this. Just be logical for a moment. For the past 30 years, my Christian brothers and sisters in the evangelical Christian movement, with whom I have shared a very warm relationship, have said, we're going to save marriage in America. You know how we're going to do it? By stopping those gays. We're going to talk about gay marriage 24/7. All gay marriage all the time. Every 2 years, congressional midterms and then the presidential elections, gay marriage, gay marriage, gay marriage, gay marriage. That's all we were doing. The dominant values-based theme in America has been gay marriage. Let's be logical about this for a second. What percent of the population is gay? Well, it's actually disputed. But even at its highest estimate, they say 7 or 8% of men, 2 to 3% of women, 10%. What percentage of the population is divorced? 50%. When's the last time you heard anyone talk about saving marriage by, say, making marital counseling tax deductible so that you actually encourage couples who are having trouble to have the financial incentive to go and get help? Never! In fact, the only men who still want to get married in America are all gay. The straight guy dates his girlfriend for 10 years, and then when she says, hey, Carrie, do you think we can talk about maybe getting money? And as soon as she begins to say the word, he passes out. But the gay guys are like protesting outside the Supreme Court. And all the heteros are saying, oh, you're ruining the party. Go away. I'm not even weighing in on this question of whether gay marriage should be legal or not legal. I'm simply saying this is not the main issue. This is religion not speaking with a still small voice of inspiration. That husbands and wives should learn to love each other and respect each other. This is just the voice of condemnation. This is searching for a scapegoat. That's why the voice of conscience has been muted in our time, and we're not as good as we should be. Because the voice of conscience never comes with condemnation. Which leads us finally, as I conclude. I told you there's 3 categories, and I split all 10 conversations into these 3. The voice of the innermost self. I believe that there is a conundrum, a puzzle, at the very heart of American life. That puzzle is simply this. How is it that a nation that has created the highest standard of living in world history, wealthiest, most powerful nation of all time, including Rome at its zenith, is also the most unhappy nation on earth? Statistically, we are the most depressed people in the world. The United States consumes 3/4 of the world's antidepressants. 1 out of 3 American women is on Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil, or a host of other miracle drugs that make you happy. And 2 out of 3 men are on Viagra. That's a joke, by the way. It's only 1 out of 3, I'm joking. How are we so unhappy? Hollywood is going through the roof. One of so many successful years passing because people love forgetting their problems. They go to see movies, they watch 4 hours of TV, junk, 1,000 channels, and there's nothing to watch. We don't even watch, we just surf. I believe that one of the key reasons that we're not achieving the happiness that Thomas Jefferson told us was our right in the Declaration of Independence is that you only really feel happy, you only really feel content when you feel you are living authentically. When you feel that your life is in accordance with your essence. When what you're doing is tailored to match your gifts. And the problem is that for all its success, America has only 4 different definitions of success. You're either successful because you're a genetic celebrity, meaning you're born beautiful, you have a great body, you have high cheekbones, you're tall, etc., etc. That's one form of success. You get by through beauty. You look great. There's a very high premium put on that in our society. Number 2, you've made a lot of money. Probably even more important. In fact, if a woman is born beautiful, she can use her beauty as a commodity by which to obtain a man of great wealth. It's almost a bartering agreement. He gets beauty, she gets money. So the second form of success is material success. The third form of American success is celebrity, fame. You may not even have any money, but you walk down the street, people notice who you are. So attention, rather than love, is the third form of success. And finally, the fourth, power. You may be ugly, you may not have a lot of money, you may not even be famous. You may be some guy who just runs a committee in Washington that they've barely ever heard of you, you have no name recognition, but boy, every lobbyist is in line because you exert great power. Those are the 4 models of American success. What if you don't fit into one of those models? What if you want to be attractive, but you don't want to spend your whole week worrying about your looks? What if you believe that going to a bookstore and reading is as valuable as going to a gym? And finding balance there, and of course you have to take care of your body. What if you actually believe that developing your mind and your heart is equally valuable? Well, then you got to retreat to a university somewhere, into an ivory tower, because that's what academia is. Seen as a little bit stodgy. What if you're not motivated by money? What if you're really motivated by being impactful? You can't feel good about who you are. The voice of the innermost self is that voice that teaches you what your personal success is. It rejects these 4 models of success. Let me just give you one example, because it's a famous example that's been in the news. All of you are perhaps aware that I wrote a book called The Michael Jackson Tapes. Me and Michael Jackson taped 30 hours of conversation. He wanted the world to know who he was and the pain that he experienced. And if you read the book, what you conclude is that here was someone who was forced into a certain model of success. Joe Jackson is condemned today as someone who, you'll see 100 books out here. Joe Jackson was a monster. It's not true. He wanted what was best for his kids. He was an African-American man with 9 children who worked in a steel mill, and he probably thought to himself, if my son can sing and dance and have a better life, I want to give him a better life. So he told him, you're not going to go to the monkey bars, and you're not going to go to the playground. You're going to be practicing from the age of 5. But what if that wasn't the success this boy wanted? So by the time he achieved 2 of those 4, making him one of the most successful men in the world, most famous, and one of the richest, he still was so unhappy because he felt that children who didn't have a childhood should have a voice. He wanted his success to be that he could be a spokesman for kids. But having been accused of certain things in 1993, then again in 2003, he couldn't use that voice. People laughed at it. Oh, you're going to be a spokesman for kids? Which led to such unhappiness and such pain and such misery. The voice of the innermost self is the hardest thing to hear in life. Because you know what it really is? It's the voice that tells you what your unique gift is. When I lecture to audiences around the world, I say to them, raise your hand if you know what your gift is. Meaning, if God forbid tomorrow, space aliens came and abducted you and put you on a spaceship to do all kinds of experiments for 30-odd years, what would the world be missing with your absence? What is your gift that without your presence, the world would now be thrown into imbalance? Honestly, hundreds of people in the room, you'll see 3 or 4 hands going up. They don't know. That's why we're not as satisfied, content, and as happy as we should be. Because we're not living authentically. We're using a model of success that may not be our own. And it's a painful thing to wake up at 60 or 70 years old, even if you're on the Forbes 400 list, and see that, wow, I'm a hero to the world, but I'm not a hero to my own kids. They use me as a model of what they don't want to be. The soulmate woman that I married 30 years ago, we haven't spoken in 30 years either. I'm now with my 4th or 5th wife. I don't even know how to conduct a relationship because I embraced what the world said to me was a success. That if I was never home, traveled constantly, worked, made money. Can you imagine if we use this message with the masters of Wall Street? I'm a capitalist. I want to, if people have found ways to create staggering wealth, let me conclude with this, God bless them. That's what capitalism is. Am I going to begrudge an NFL quarterback like Eli Manning who gets paid, I don't know, $20 million a year? Because I feel a teacher only gets paid $80,000, it's wrong? No, you know, that's what the market will pay. That's capitalism, it's an imperfect system, but we've tried everything else and it doesn't work. And people deserve to keep what they made, fair enough. But instead of the Occupy Wall Street movement, which has some important points, saying bankers greed, and there's no even level playing field. There doesn't seem to be because they get bailouts and Main Street doesn't get bailouts. What if we simply had a different message? Money doesn't mean you're a success. If you've made billions of dollars, but your own kids or your own friends or the country thinks that you're nothing but a greedy SOB, are you a success? In other words, the voice of the innermost self is this. When I had to finally sell, let me conclude with this, when I had to finally sell Shalom to advertisers, there's something that called the network upfront. An upfront is where the networks present their upcoming, that's why it's called an upfront, their upcoming slate of new shows to the advertisers, these big conventions that take place twice a year, so that you get the advertisers on board, because without advertising revenue, you're not on the air. So how was I supposed to sum up my show? And they only give you like 5 minutes of Discovery Communications at ONTLC. They say to me, okay, remember, you have Procter & Gamble, you have every major corporation that spends hundreds of millions, billions of dollars a year in advertising, they're there, and you gotta win them over. You have a new show, without advertising, you're off the air. So they said, it's your turn. I go out on the stage, everyone's staring at me, give me a microphone. Shmuley, tell us what your new show is about. I said, you know what, ladies and gentlemen, you're all busy. You have a lot of things to do. I'm not here to waste your time. My show is simply this. Each and every one of you is important. You control big budgets. You have people that are prepared to wine you and dine you here at this network event, just in the hope that you might spend some money on their show. Wow, are you important? They'll fly you out, they'll put you up in suites. Then you gotta go home. And what if when you come home, Daddy's home, your own kids can't even hear you because they haven't taken the iPod earbuds out of their ears. Or they're on a computer and you have to like rip them away just to say hello. Or your wife is still on the phone. Or your husband hasn't even come home because there isn't much of a relationship. My show is about one thing. Are you really a hero in life? If the people who mean the most to you think the least of you. Are you really a hero in life if the people who mean the most to you think the least of you? This book is about living in a manner where you're no longer out to impress, but you are out to live authentically, sincerely, and from within. Thank you very much.
We can take a couple of questions now from the audience. question tonight?
I must have answered.
So how do you transfer the respect for self and the coordinate love of self without dropping the names or self-love as such to the everyday? How do you incorporate the respect, the positive nature of understanding yourself, of finding a way that the people who you love most will think of you, and get the earbuds out of their ears? Is there a methodology? Is there a formula?
There is only one way. I wish there were many ways, but there's only one way. You have to buy my book. Without that, there really is no hope. Situation's hopeless.
Someone once said about, asked about the target market for the book, and he said, anyone with a credit card. This was a rabbinical book.
Oh, with me, I also take cash. PayPal. No, you change it through action. One of the 10 conversations is do your way to feeling. You don't wait to feel that you want to make change. You start to do it even if you don't feel. I want to live more authentically. I'm going to be more wholesome. If you said someone's a name dropper, then you go to a party and you decide I'm going to go the whole night without dropping a name. Or if you're a woman and you date very insecurely, meaning you allow men to lead you to places or in directions that you're not comfortable with because you don't know how to say no and you're just happy that anyone takes you out, you have to be more confident. And you have to stop being so fearful. And you'd be amazed at how people start to respect you. Sincerity and authenticity is deeply attractive because, especially in our society where it's such a rare commodity.
So I learned about the book. I had heard you speak with Dennis Prager and found the conversation quite interesting. Went home and downloaded the book, read the book, and tried to practice the questions at the end of each chapter. So my question is really, I probably struggled with kind of going deeper with the questions. So what advice do you have as I try that more to kind of get into the truth of the questions that you're asking in each chapter?
Buy a second book. You only have the electronic version. You have to buy now the hard. The questions are there at the end of each chapter to spark that inner conversation. To ask yourself certain questions that you will have to then answer to yourself. But every person is like an onion, and we have these infinite layers, and as we peel them away, we do go deeper, and there really is no end. So if you ask me, how do we learn to go deeper, just beyond the questions that I ask, I would say that depth is something that leads to even greater depth. It's like asking me, how does a husband and wife have deeper, more intimate conversations that go beyond the practical? And the answer is, of course, well, if he initiates a conversation which says, you know what, I wanted to talk to you. I had some thoughts recently about how my relationship with my father affects my sense of self-esteem. Well, that conversation then leads his wife probably a few days later maybe to reflect on other factors that have impacted on her own self-esteem. And now the conversation has been joined and it leads to deeper and deeper conversations. It's like digging. You know, a beach, the more you pull away the sand, it just starts to get easier to dig. And if we avoid the deeper questions in favor of the practical, because relationships have become so utterly practical, unfortunately. Look, one of the most successful relationships books was men are from Mars, women are from Venus, which really said that men and women will never be able to communicate deeply, that they just speak different languages, and all you can do is offset gender difference by knowing that a woman really meant X when she said Y. That means we can never have real intimacy. I obviously don't believe that. I think that conversation is about a sharing of souls, but you still have to, in fact, first have to know your soul, and the more you do so, the more your soul will reveal itself to you. So by engaging in the process, I think it begins to happen almost intuitively, but it takes a lot of courage. Because it's so easy just to revert back to the practical. Why do you think, when I was writing this book, and I think I tell the story at the beginning of the book, I was reading this book about John Lennon's 10 years in New York City, just across the park. And one day John Lennon was sitting with a biographer, and television was on in the background. And Lennon, he was very insightful about life. I mean, you can't, artists are supposed to see these things that the rest of us miss. And he said, when I grew up in Liverpool, there was always a fireplace burning in the background. Now, in America, he said, the television has replaced the fireplace. Even if it's muted, it's always on. So, but here's what's interesting. When a fire is on in the background, it's a soothing kind of sound that invites conversation. People love speaking by fires, sitting by a fireplace, speaking by a fireplace. The television is the opposite. The essence of our culture is to provide so much external noise so that we never have time to talk to ourselves or to think. Just think about it. Everything that you have, let's say Steve Jobs is the most successful CEO of modern times. Everything he built, this isn't a criticism, it's just a reflection of our culture. Every product he built is designed to pull you out of yourself into a virtual world. And some of the things even overlap, like an iPad and an iPhone, some of their features overlap. And it's still not enough, because we love being pulled outside of ourselves. It's very difficult to go inside. That's why the Jewish Sabbath is so important. Because this is the only culture or civilization that actually says that electricity is forbidden to be used for a 25-hour period. All these modern appliances that govern every week for 25 hours, I can't answer a telephone. I can't go online. And that means that suddenly conversations with other human beings must fill that empty space. Getting closer to my kids, getting closer to my wife, getting closer to my community, getting closer to myself has to fill that void. But I look at my friends who don't have a Sabbath, and it's all noise all the time. So how can we go deeper? Is it an excuse not to? That's why I believe that America has to have a Sabbath. I started something, if you go online, here we are, going online again. It's called Turn Friday Night into, FridaysFamily.com, Turn Friday Night into Family Night. We have some of America's leading celebrities encouraging non-Jewish families to set aside 2 uninterrupted hours that is distraction-free every Friday night with your kids, where you don't answer a phone and the TV is off. And this is spreading. We have thousands of families who have signed up. Go to FridaysFamily.com and sign up yourselves.
I think a lot of the reason why some relationships doesn't last because of communication. I think that's a big part of it. But I think the other part is because women outnumber men. So I think that's a big reason why some men have a problem making a commitment, because the ratio is 7 women to 1 guy, or 11 women to 1 guy, depending on what stage you're in. And if when a man gets married, it's still going to be 7 women out there. So I think that's the reason why relationships don't last long. One more thing, and I noticed a lot of relationships within marriage, at least, I don't know the percentage of that, but a lot of people marriage have 2 marriages, they're always working on their second marriage. Like you said, in Hollywood, you have 15 marriages.
Well, I think so. The ratios of 1 to 7 or 1 to 11, maybe in Alaska, but it's I think it's the opposite, right? In Alaska, there's 40 men for every 1 woman. So sometimes it's the reverse, and I'm not sure that we necessarily see men behaving better when there's a paucity of women as opposed to too many women. No, I don't think it's a numbers game. I think, we live in a society where men are behaving very badly. Gosh, every week there's another sex scandal of smart men who've been very successful, behaving very stupidly, and usually crushing a woman who has done a lot to be close to them. breaking her heart and humiliating her. We don't see as many women behaving in that way. I mean, this is a subject that I've written a great deal about. I wrote a whole book about adultery. I just wrote this essay about Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher. Not that I'm particularly interested in Hollywood celebrity chatter, because it's not that interesting. But the idea of a 25-year-old man marrying someone who, I think, what was she, 13, 17 years older than her?
She was 41.
That was interesting. Can men be attracted to women who are older than them as those women age? Because we're a very ageist culture. And women are made to feel that after they're 40, their best years are behind them. Whereas Sean Connery is like 2,000 years old. And every year he's voted People Magazine's sexiest man alive. I mean, he hasn't been alive for 10 years, but even so, he's a man can be a desiccated corpse and he's the sexiest man alive. But 41 years old, finished, done. There's a lot of reasons why men behave badly. I don't want to blame the victim, because it's the men who are responsible. But it is true that it's harder in a society where women don't value themselves and let men get away with a lot for men. In other words, in a society where women aren't ladies, it's going to be harder for men to be gentlemen, even though that's not an excuse. You have to behave like a gentleman no matter what. But something happened. I wrote about this in my book, Hating Women, which is about how the culture puts women down. Something happened where women began to internalize the kind of loathing that the culture beats out to them. In other words, we live in a culture where women's bodies are used to sell beer. We live in a culture where women's bodies are used to sell cars. Women are becoming a means to an end. In the same way that, not to compare the two, but what was the worst sin in American history was the abomination of slavery. Now, what is slavery? Slavery was where a white man was trained to look at a black man or woman and not see someone with their own dreams, their own aspirations, but rather to seek the living fulfillment of your needs. You need someone to do work, that's what this person exists for. You need someone to collect all the produce from the field, that's what this person exists for. This person is not an end, this person is a means. Okay. To a much lesser degree, but it is still somewhat toxic, a lot of men are being trained to see women in the same way. What is internet porn? And 70% of the internet is porn. It's men trained to see women as the walking fulfillment of their erotic urges. Internet porn isn't about seeing a woman who has dreams, ambitions, wants to be in a relationship. She simply exists to do whatever you need her to do. That's why internet porn is always associated with misogyny. You always get these spam emails saying, look at these bitchs, doing this, look at these. It's always putting them down, or so my friends tell me. That was a joke, by the way. Not that I ever saw any of this stuff myself. It always involves misogyny, because the moment, as Immanuel Kant, the great philosopher, said, the definition of immorality is to treat another person as a means rather than an end. And if you were to ask me, what is the principal reason that men are mistreating women in our time? It's that we men are slowly being conditioned and allowing ourselves to be conditioned to see women as a means rather than an end. Female beauty is used to sell products. It's incredible. Here's the perfect example. I love football. I love watching football. You probably see that before I became a writer, I was NFL quarterback. Just after I finished my career in the NBA. Football is the most popular American sport by far. 1 out of 2 people, 1 out of 3 will watch the Super Bowl. Amazing. And when you watch a football game, it really draws these two patterns of men and women in stark relief. The men do the serious work. They're like throwing touchdown passes, and they're crushing each other at the line, and they're running for more yardage and kicking field goals. You know what the women are doing? They're jumping up and down in spandex with pom-poms. It's unbelievable. I mean, you really would have thought that this kind of nonsense and stupidity would have gone out with the advent of feminism. But the truth is that feminism has failed completely. Because if the purpose of feminism was to get men to appreciate a woman's brains rather than her bust, then how many women today on a national level are really appreciated for that? How many women in America are famous for their brains as opposed to their bodies? When it comes to their bodies and their looks, the number's endless. I mean, even what's Lady Gaga more famous for, her body or her music? Well, maybe both in equal measure. But it wasn't like that with Ella Fitzgerald. She became a world-renowned superstar by nature of her voice. She didn't have to sell her body. Did the Beatles have to run around in Lycra. It's only women who have to also show their bodies, and they're almost naked in virtually every music video. The men don't have to dress that way. So why is it that men are, I would say there's maybe 5 or 6, 7 women in America who have a 80, 90% name recognition level for intellectual achievements in the United States. There's Katie Couric, Oprah, Michelle Obama, and that really comes because of her husband's position more than her own.
Ariana Huffington.
Ariana Huffington doesn't have an 80 or 90% name recognition. She's known to people who love news websites, etc. So she doesn't have
Celebrity. I thought you were talking about intellectual.
No, right, but Ariana's a friend, and she's definitely up there, but she does not have a 90% name recognition level. Hillary Clinton. So there's maybe 5 or 6, you can count them on a hand. Now, if we want to talk about women who are famous for their bodies or how they look, oh my God, it would just go on and on. That, unfortunately, is the failure of feminism. And I have to tell you, I'm a feminist because I'm raising 6 daughters. And I want my daughters to believe that they should put at least as much time into developing their minds as developing their figure, or more. Hopefully much more. But that has to be predicated on a woman's belief that in so doing, she won't be punished for it. Why don't men have to shove needles in their heads in order to be attractive? Or glass ceiling? No, I think the glass ceiling for women has been broken. I'm not speaking. If a woman wants to do the achieve, I think she can. It's much harder for the reasons I'm saying. But I'm not worried about breaking glass ceilings, because that seems to be like, are we going to have a female president? I mean, that kind of stuff doesn't interest me as much. In the same way, I don't really care if the next president, there's already an African American president, will be a Jewish president. I don't really care. I mean, I have issues that are close to my heart. I care whether a president is pro-Israel, definitely, but I don't care if they're Jewish, couldn't care less. Those kind of glass ceilings don't mean anything to me. I'm not interested in a single person's achievements. I think that most African Americans do not feel that because there's an African American president that some massive social change has come about. It's not individual achievements that matter. It's social movements that matter. And just because you have one person that's an anomaly, that doesn't mean anything. So the glass ceiling thing is not my issue. If you had a female president, would it change all this? Of course not. If we had a woman who became president of the United States, would it change the fact that for a woman to get a recording contract, she has to have a great body? No, of course not. A man can still look like CeeLo Green, he can be big, but a woman can't. She has to be shapely and half nude in order to get a recording contract today. That's unbelievable. You know, the funny thing about it is, it's getting late, so I'll just conclude with this. The funny thing about it is that some of the people who are responsible for some of these things later had to pay a price for it. Let's take Demi Moore, for example. Allegedly, Ashton Kutcher cheated on her. Okay, allegedly. So I don't know if it's true, and I'm not assuming it's true. But if it were true, and she put out a statement saying, I'm leaving this marriage because I believe that marriage involves certain commitments, or whatever exactly the statement was. So let's say she's saying, you know, I don't think my husband should run around with someone who is 20 years younger than me, who may, according to the culture, look better than me. I think he has to honor his commitments. The problem is that, and I'm not blaming the victim, it's if he did this, that's disgusting, and he is solely responsible. No one made him do this except him. So let there be no misconstruing my words. I believe men have to take full responsibility for their actions. But she did do these nude cover shoots for Vanity Fair. She did do a stupid movie called Striptease, which was panned by the critics. And the only purpose seemed to be to show off her body. So if you help create a culture where a woman's body matters much more than anything else, then 22-year-olds are going to get more attention than 49-year-olds because it's only a body that matters. And we have to create a more wholesome culture where a woman who's 49 but is still beautiful because the body is only one of 5 components of attraction. There's a woman's body, a woman's heart, a woman's mind, the scent of a woman, her pheromones, and finally the voice of a woman. Why do you think so many men spend billions of dollars a year on phone sex? Because a woman's voice can be so erotic and so seductive and so attractive. But we've reduced women to one of those 5 components. So we have to reverse a lot of that rot. That's probably more about my relationships books than about tonight's book. I want to thank Barnes & Noble for having me. For
Rabbi,
those,
thank you.